Hello. I see some beautiful faces and also some beautiful Zoom photos and names. It's always so interesting to see the names and see faces and this great opportunity that we all have to connect. And I really love and prefer to be in person with everyone. And also, this is super cool that we have Zoom that allows us to come together and be able to do something like this. So I'm glad that the technology is supporting us as we are all here together today. Awesome. So I put the form in the chat. So for you showing up today live, you can enter your name for attendance. And thank you, Amanda, for pointing out yesterday that it said the balance is real change versus the balance is real challenge. And I don't know, that was definitely an error, but we're going for change here. So I think it's going to work out in our favor. And what I have learned about myself on this journey that I'm still very much in the middle of myself is that, given the bogus belief that I have and given the programming that I received when I was younger and still continue to receive it as an adult in my 40s today, is that, I tend to lean towards perfectionism. And I often say that I'm a recovering perfectionist, but it's recovering is kind of in quotes because it's still something that plagues me to this day. And, to see that there was an error on that form back in the day would have destroyed me. And I'm sort of celebrating it now. Not that I don't want to produce excellent work for all of you. That's definitely a core value of mine and my business. But because I've found that it's more important for me to be in action than to be perfect. And this drive for perfection has held me back in my business, slowed things down. It's held me back in the amount of joy and fun that I experience. So, I'm today and yesterday using that as an opportunity to embrace the mistakes and the taking action over getting everything perfect and just right. All right. So with that, I would like us to start with a short meditation. It's Thursday. It's probably been a long week for all of us. It's the afternoon, and I just want to give us all a moment to connect in and get grounded. So if you have your screen on, your video camera on, and you want to turn it off just for more privacy, you're welcome. You can, of course, keep it on. I'd love to see you. I am going to close my eyes for a moment, and I encourage you, just wherever you're at, to give yourself a moment to come into this space. So get comfortable in your chair. If you're driving, of course, if you don't want to do this, you can just maybe bring in a little more peace. But wherever you're at right now, whether you're here with us live or you're watching the replay, take a moment to settle into your body. So we talked about mindfulness being essential so that we can notice what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our body, so that we can choose more productive thoughts and beliefs. And our body is really our tool to the present moment. When we find ourselves distracted and multitasking and thinking up in that head hurricane space, when we come back to our body and our breath, that is a tool for just being right here, right now. So notice your body, notice where your sits bones connect to your chair. Notice your feet planted on the ground or whatever they're touching. Notice your shoulders, let them draw a little bit lower down your back, away from your ears. And sit up even taller. And then for this part of the meditation, turn your palms face up if this feels okay to you, and place them on top of your lap. This is a different gesture that we can use in meditation. It's a little less grounding, but a little more open and receiving. And especially with all of us seeking balance, we're often in so much doing that even this open and receiving gesture of our palms open can perhaps allow a little more receiving from others and even towards ourselves. We'll take just a couple more moments to connect into our breath. So breathe in and out your nose and be the witnesser of your breath. And then begin to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, maybe move around a little bit in your body. Whenever you're ready, you can make your way back to right here, opening your eyes and joining us. So I wanted to check in with all of you. I know we talked about authenticity on day one and what holds us back from that. We talked about yesterday, really spent a lot of time on our bogus belief and how that sort of creates a barrier around our very powerful, authentic self and creates some of our strengths, but also a lot of our weaknesses and our coping mechanisms, our defense mechanisms, our what I call our hurt armor. And so I just wanted to check in if anyone has any questions, what questions you have regarding your bogus belief. Maybe you could drop a yes in the chat if you were able to identify your bogus belief. And how about drop a no in the chat if you haven't yet, or if you're somewhere in between, give me like a 50-50 or something like that so I can see where you're all at. Type a yes if you found your bogus belief, or no if you haven't, or a 50-50 between the two. So I'm seeing that you're between two bogus beliefs. Got one yes. Yeah, and so sometimes as we start to do this, I got another yes. As we do this, we can kind of have two that resonate with us, or a few that resonate with us. And so our bogus belief is usually an I am statement and an I am not statement. And so mine, for example, as we talked about yesterday, was I am alone and I am not wanted. And so if you have two, perhaps it's a combination of those statements. And really what we want to do is we want to identify it as best as we can. So I would say if you're kind of stuck between two of them, pick the one that sort of doesn't feel the best, the one that you're like, oh, like that doesn't really feel so good. I wish it weren't true, but I feel like it is, and remember, this isn't true about us, but it feels so true because of decades and decades of living this bogus belief and going through confirmation bias. So lean towards the one that you're like, oh, you kind of feel it once you get there. And this is the kind of thing that when I'm working with my clients one-on-one, we dive into and we brainstorm together so we can really nail it down. But for right now, for this challenge, just go with the one that seems to be it for you. It looks like most of you have yours. And I see Stephanie saying it's so deeply rooted. Yeah, it is. It is really deeply rooted. It's decades and decades of continuing to live this way. And remember, the bad news is the good news. So once we start seeing it, we're going to start seeing it more and more. And only once we see it can we start to say no more. Say, you get in the back seat. Me as the adult, the observer, the conscious person, I am driving this car. I am driving this bus. This lie, this bogus belief is taking a back seat. So I want to start to unravel these a little bit more before we head into a bit more around relationships. So say the two choices again. Oh, so the two choices of the statement, if I'm understanding your question, is I am and I am not. So like my lie is I am alone and I am not wanted. So it's usually an I am statement plus an I am not statement. Sometimes they are kind of the opposite of each other, but not always. And if you are unsure, as I mentioned yesterday, this kind of I am not enough is sort of the overarching theme of all of them. So let's work with these a little bit because we want to start to unravel them even more. And so I'm going to have you do a couple journal questions right now. And I want you to take a moment to write down, well, what is your hurt armor? Knowing that you have this bogus belief that you created in order to really protect yourself as a child and try to make sense of the world. What is your hurt armor? Remember, the hurt armor is the way that we protect ourselves. It's those defense mechanisms. It's the way that we cope. So my hurt armor was being uber independent, not asking for help, thinking that self-care was for other people. And that if I did it, I was weak. Our hurt armor could be, being a martyr and wanting to do everything for our family, being a people pleaser, not wanting to speak up and raise our hand and be seen, not wanting to make too much of a ruckus. It might be, being really loud because we want attention, or being really quiet because we don't want attention. It might be things like addictions, like addiction to alcohol or food or overwork or scrolling. It could be different things like not feeling like our value is good enough just in who we are, though always needing to do more. I think that's one of the things that we talked about yesterday. So what is the hurt armor that shows up for you? Is it letting people cross your boundaries or not even establishing boundaries? Is it playing the victim? Oh, well, this success is for other people, balance is for other people, but it's not for me. Let me think of some others that come up. And if you have any that you want to share in the chat, and they could be yours or just ones that you even witnessed in other people, feel free to drop them in. But our hurt armor is really what we do to protect ourselves from the rest of the world and put that buffer between our authentic self and others. This is also, and this training is more on balance, but when I work with leadership teams, it's also this hurt armor. And I don't approach it in the same way that I do in this workshop that we're doing together here, but it's essentially this armor that we wear as leaders that creates a disconnection with our team. And really, as leaders in the current century with the different workforces or the different generations that we have in the workforce, we need to make connection in order to inspire our team. That old way of leading from fear and from authoritarianism doesn't work. And so we even have to learn to drop that armor at work so that our team can want to fight for us as a real human versus this person that just projects perfection forward at all time. Okay, so it looks like we've got some hurt armors written down. Is anyone stuck? Or do you give me a thumbs up if you were able to identify some hurt armor that you experience? Got some thumbs ups? Okay, good. So 2 more questions for this part right now. And I'm gonna read some of the comments for us. So I achieve love by giving. If I don't give, I won't be loved. My hurt armor is overworking and overgiving. So there's could be a bogus belief around there is, I am not lovable, or something around that not being lovable. And so we overgive and we overwork because we think that that's going to equate to that love. And that goes a lot with my lie of I'm not wanted. Right. And so I did a lot of same things. I overworked and I overgave because I didn't feel like I was wanted. Also in the chat, I'm seeing not initiating hanging out with friends or family. I wait to be invited because then they don't have a chance to say no. Yeah. Wow. That's such a great That's such a great share. It's like we desire belonging, we desire connection with others, but we're afraid that we're going to get rejected. We're afraid that they're going to say no. And so we don't even give them the opportunity. Right. And, I see this, I've done this myself. I've seen this in a lot of different people, and even it's slightly different, but I also see this in marriage and partnerships. We really have to invite the person that we're in a relationship with to the party. Like we have to invite them in. And I'm not talking about just connection, which is essential for a relationship to thrive, but I'm even talking about things like household responsibilities. I had a client once and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Every time I walk by the washer and the dryer, like the clothes are still sitting there. My husband never puts them in the washer. He never starts a load of laundry." And I said, "Well, have you ever asked him to, or have you ever made the request?" And she's like, "Well, he should just know to do the laundry." And I get it. Like, I wish that all humans just knew to do the laundry and just knew to wipe the crumbs off the table and just knew to do all the things. Even at work, we just want our employees to just know how to do what they're supposed to be doing. But we really have to make the request from a space of neutrality, not emotion, and from a space of love, and say, "Hey, it really would help me out around the house if you could start the laundry." Or, "Hey, I miss you and I'd love to get together." And then stepping back and seeing, okay, are they going to accept or not? And recognizing that once we find our people, they will say yes. And that comes from the journey of building community, which is also something that we work on in my coaching program. So one other example that I have here, hurt armor. "I am strong. I can handle everything. I don't need help. I'm strong and I don't need help." Okay, so that could be, I'm trying to think if that's the actual bogus belief, that I am strong and I don't need help. I think that's the hurt armor. And we would have to dive into that sort of one-on-one to think about what the bogus belief is. But yeah, we think we can handle everything. And you probably can handle most everything, right? Like it's something that I experience. And I think that's why so many of us feel that burnout, is because we can do a lot of the things. And what we do is we keep doing them and we keep handling them. And then we push ourselves to the breaking point. And so while we might think that it's true that we don't need help and that we can do most things ourselves, we have to recognize that it was really in those early childhood years where we had needs that weren't met by our caregivers. And so we learned how to meet all of those needs ourselves, whether those were emotional needs, whether those were physical needs, whatever they were. We learned how to meet all of our needs ourselves. And so now it's hard to depend on others, open ourselves to others to give to us. And, I think it's really important to say this, and this is what I've started to realize just recently, actually, is that, this work is about turning inward. We always want to turn inward because we can't change anyone else. We can invite change for them, but we really can only change ourselves, as we talked about. So we always turn inward and we do the work. And we have to understand that relationships are meant to be two-sided, right? So if we are always the one giving in the relationship, it doesn't mean that we need to turn back in more and keep giving ourselves more. It maybe means that there needs to be a shift in this relationship so that both parties in the relationship are giving. Because that's really what the beauty of relationships are. It's a back and forth, a give and a take, give and a take, give and a take, whether that's a work relationship, a friendship, romantic relationship. Yes, we turn inward and we create and nurture relationships where both people are giving and both people are taking. Okay. So we've identified our bogus belief and how it shows up in our hurt armor. The next question that I want you to answer is, what payoffs do you get for letting your bogus belief run the show? What payoffs do you get? A payoff could be something like, well, I don't have to risk rejection, right? If I don't invite anyone, then I never have to risk them saying no. Or as long as I keep giving, this person will be in my life. As long as I keep giving, I'm going to have this job. Or a payoff for letting our bogus belief run the show might be something like, well, I don't have to change. I don't have to put up a boundary and feel really uncomfortable. The payoffs really all go down to us staying comfortable, because in order for the bogus belief not to run our life, we have to make a change of sorts. And change is scary, often hard. We talked about either on day 1 or day 2 how our brain doesn't want to change. Our brain wants to keep everything in the same pattern that it's in so that it can preserve energy to be on the lookout for saber-toothed tigers and other danger that might be coming at us. So we just have to recognize that our brain is sort of working against us, and our payoffs. Hello? Was that a question for me, or was that or no? Okay, I'm going to keep going, but please unmute and share if you had a question or a comment. Our payoffs gently allow us to stay in the discomfort of our comfort zone. And, we might be able to keep eating chocolate cake. We might be able to not have to look at our bank account and notice that it's very, very low. It allows us to stay in that safe place of the comfortableness, even though it's uncomfortable. And so I'm going to invite the same thing, because I think it's so beautiful to hear all of our experiences. If you would like to share any of your payoffs in the chat, it really helps us all to see our own payoffs, because a lot of these run similar to one another. It inspires us to be able to learn and grow. So if you're willing to share some payoffs or even some ideas in the chat, I would love for you to do that. And then we'll move into question number 3. Yeah, so before I share the number 3 in the chat, I see the risk of failure, right? So when we stay with our bogus belief running the show, we don't have to risk failing. We don't have to risk looking silly. We don't have to risk things being messy. And we can stay in that perfection even that I was talking about at the beginning of our call today. Okay. Number 3 for this exercise right here is, what is it costing you to stay this way? What is it costing you to stay this way? What is it costing you to let your bogus belief run the show? Is it costing you balance? Is it costing you peace? Is it costing you fun? Is it costing you a promotion? Is it costing you love? Is it costing you presence with your family? Is it costing you health issues? I just met with my health coach earlier today, and she was going over my blood labs with me, and she said that a lot of my markers were likely stress related. And so I laughed because, we always teach what we most need to learn. And, I'm very intentional with the way that I manage stress and balance my life. And yet there are still aspects that I need to work on that are showing up now in my body. In my 30s, it didn't impact me that much, or at least it wasn't so obvious. And now in my 40s, it's my body saying, no, you need to take care of this. So it's quite interesting how life just makes us do the work. Yeah, so that's a really great example of a benefit, the payoff for staying the same. It's written in the chat. It says, I can do what I like and not worry about someone else's likes or dislikes. Yeah, so we get to kind of keep things the way we want them and do life on our terms, which, is definitely something I think we want to lean towards, is doing life on our terms. And also when we are in relationship, we have to recognize that it's at least 2 people in that, and we want to do what's best for the relationship. Yeah, and then we have the opportunity the challenge of losing out on turning acquaintances into true friends. when we keep people at an arm's distance, when we do what we want to do versus getting other people involved. So, okay, great. This is good. You guys are sharing some of the costs. So why do you think I ask you to write down the payoffs and the costs of your bogus belief? I'm going to see if, let me give you a minute to write in the chat. Why is it that we need to write down and really get clear on both the payoffs and the costs of our bogus belief? Well, in case you're writing in the chat, I'll let you do that. But I want to show you this little. This is page 62 of my book, and I think I talked about this actually on day 1, and it's the change equation. And basically, what it says is that we will only change once the costs are greater than the payoffs. We all get some sort of payoff. We all get some sort of benefit to staying like we are. Yeah, so Dodie said we recognize the need for change, how it's really impacting us. And we realize that our payoff isn't as great as it seems. Like it's comfortable. It's always easier, right? It's always easier just to keep doing what we've already done until we start to see what it's costing us. Until that starts to happen, until we start to have the health problems or the marriage problems or the work problems or the loneliness. Right? So once we start to see those things and we shine the light on them and we allow ourselves to get present enough to notice them, okay, now we recognize we need to shift. Good. So this is all inquiry to help us start to move forward into the next stage of taking back the power over our life. What I want to talk about now, we're just going to set this aside for a moment, is the word co-creation. And I remember when I was working with Dr. Shefali and I studied with her for quite a while. She does conscious parenting and runs the Conscious Coaching Institute. She talks about co-creation, and a lot of people talk about co-creation, but I just remember her really nailing it into my head when I first started studying with her. And essentially, we want to recognize that we are the co-creators of our life. Sometimes this is spoken about as in, we're co-creating our life with the universe, but that's not what I'm speaking about here. What I'm talking is about is the co-creation of our results of our life and the co-creation of our relationships. So we're moving more into this conversation around that emotional baggage that we carry from other people, from relationships that we have with others. And the co-creation is essentially that there's 2 people in every relationship. Even if we look at our bogus belief, that we created for ourselves, and we keep creating the results that it's showing us or that we're getting. And we need to take responsibility is essentially what I'm inviting you and myself, all of us, to do, is to recognize that we are the ones responsible for what happens in our life. Yes, we have this bogus belief, but now we are the ones that can say, I'm going to shift things. I'm going to be different in my relationships. And so looking at relationships specifically, we are co-creators. So I talked a little bit about my relationship with my husband yesterday and on day 1, and how, he did things in the relationship that shouldn't be repeated and that were really hard for me to forgive. And also I did things that shouldn't be repeated and were very hard for him to forgive on me. We were in this dynamic of co-creation of our marriage. This also happened in my relationship with my father. So he was one of the people that I had the biggest emotional baggage that I was carrying around. There was an incident that happened with him and I was upset with him. And looking back, it wasn't even that big of a deal, but I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't really have the emotional intelligence to have a conversation with him. We never really had conversations that were, real. They were all very surface level. How's the weather? What grades are you getting? What are you guys doing this weekend? And so when I was upset with my father, I didn't know how to tell him because that was just not something we did. And so, that goes back to even the development of my bogus belief, right? Like I was upset that he didn't invite me to go out and wash the cars with them. I didn't know how to express that. I didn't have an emotionally present parent there that noticed that I was upset and helped me to learn how to express that. And so that pattern repeated with my father decades and decades later. So the way that I co-created this drama, this emotional baggage with my father, is I started to put up a wall between him and I. He did something that upset me, and instead of me sharing what upset me, I just stepped back. I stopped calling him for advice. I stopped reaching out as often. We kept things very, very surface level. And as the years went on, this wall got bigger and bigger and bigger between us. And then as I was doing this work, I recognized that, yes, he upset me. Again, when looking back on it now, something that's not that big a deal, that shouldn't have created years and years of separation between a father and his daughter. But I co-created that. And so, as we move through this methodology, and this is part of the work that I do in my Mindful Balanced Life coaching program, is we look at these relationships where there's still some heaviness, there's some tension that needs to be cleaned up. And first, we have to recognize, what is our contribution to the relationship? Even if someone hurt you and it's not the kind of relationship where you'd ever talk to them again, there is still some sort of co-creation that you give that experience. If you, allow yourself to think about it, if you allow yourself to blame that other person, if you allow yourself to sit in hate or anger towards that person, you're co-creating the dynamic of whatever it is. So a lot of times I find when I'm working with my clients that a lot of it's just communication that hasn't happened, right? I had a client whose friend was trying to get sober, and she noticed that she was drinking when they were together, and she didn't really know how to bring it up with her. And so she didn't say anything. And then she felt like she was enabling her friend by not addressing it, even though she knew her friend had been drinking. And because of this sort of hiding of the drinking of the friend and her not addressing it, that imaginary wall went between them in a way. And she stopped reaching out. And then she's wondering, well, what's going on? And there's this co-creation of, okay, we're now distant from each other. I had another client whose husband would come home from work and he would be just kind of venting about the day and really stressed. And oftentimes she would jump in, and she was very empathic and intuitive. And she would say, well, did you do this? Or maybe you could try this, or maybe this would help. And she would do a lot of what I talk about in my leadership trainings, where we jump in and we try to fix the problem versus just listening to someone and allowing them to come to their own solution or conclusion, or empowering themselves to come up with the answer. And so she, from a place of good intention, was trying to help and trying to fix. But as she would fix, then he wouldn't feel heard. And so she's trying to fix from a place of good intention. He was trying to connect and vent and release his stress from a place of good connection, but she's fixing. He starts withdrawing, more stressed, checking his phone during dinner, and now they're totally in separate places. So that was the dynamic that she realized that she was co-creating in the relationship. So her way to shift that was, okay, next time that he came forward with a work stress at the end of the day while they're making dinner together, she would listen and bite her tongue and put her hand over her mouth and listen, right? So then she started co-creating a new relationship, a new dance between them. And I think about especially all relationships, but perhaps our marriage is our most important one. I really look at it like a dance. So if one dance partner starts to shift their moves a little bit, the other one may follow. It's not always guaranteed, but it can be that the other person follows, as in my client that I just explained to you. So we want to think about what we are co-creating in any of the relationships in our life, personal or professional, that aren't suiting us, where we feel out of balance, where we feel some heaviness or tension. What is it that you can take ownership for? And that doesn't mean that you own the result of the relationship. The other person likely has to change and take their ownership as well. But again, we first come back to myself. What am I co-creating? And can I shift my dance moves to co-create a different relationship? The other aspect of this that helps us to move into cleaning up these relationships, and in my book and also in my coaching program, we go through a module on the cleanup conversation where we really take a specific conversation framework to people like our fathers and our mothers and our friends and our husbands or our wives. And we clean up these relationships by taking ownership of our part. In order to do that, we first need to become emotionally neutral about the situation. So we've got to talk out or work out whatever we are upset about. We need to recognize our own co-creation so that we can take ownership of it and authentically apologize for it. And we also need to learn how to forgive. And it's so interesting because I ran a panel discussion for the CMAA World Conference in Vegas last month, and it was on emotional intelligence, of course. And so we're talking about emotional intelligence, but as it specifically relates to the business world. And one of the topics that came up as we were prepping for the panel was this idea of forgiveness, because we have to sort of keep forgiving ourselves over and over again, especially when we're driven to be perfect, when we're driven to please others, when we're learning about emotional intelligence and we're growing. We have to have some sort of compassion for ourselves when we catch ourselves in our bogus belief. And we have to, oh, wow, okay, there I am again. But instead of beating myself up about it, I'm going to say, okay, that was my bogus belief. And I'm going to choose instead to do something different, to co-create something different. So even in this business panel, we were talking about forgiveness of ourselves so that we can really manage ourselves better, so we can show up as a better leader for our team. And then also what that looks like as forgiving others. So we, of course, have to forgive our team when they make mistakes. And in fact, if you look at high performance cultures, we really need to introduce an embracing of mistakes and failures and changes in order for innovation to come forth, right? We can't all get it perfect, and we're not going to innovate if we're trying that way. So there's this aspect of forgiveness that can show up in the business space, but I really want to look at it in the personal space right here, right now. And what I want to say around this is that we cannot fully forgive others until we have fully forgiven ourselves. We cannot love others more than we love ourselves. So the love that we give in our personal relationships is really capped by the amount of love and acceptance that we have of ourselves. And this is something that, I still work on. I thought I kind of took care of this 10, 15 years ago, but it gets deeper and deeper as I continue to grow, is this idea of self-love and really loving and embracing all parts of ourselves. And think about just being able to open the doors of loving our children more, loving our partners more, loving our teams more, and what that could, potentially look like. And so let's talk a little bit about how we can move to really embracing ourselves and loving ourselves more. It starts with an embracing and a loving of this bogus belief that we talked about, that part of us that was trying to take care of ourselves, that part of us that didn't know what to do when we were 5 or 6 or 4 years old, and start to recognize that what's called the inner child that shows up when our bogus belief is running the show. And we want to recognize the areas where we do have the guilt or the shame popping up, and learn to forgive ourselves around those areas. So, this was an exercise that I did at different points over the last maybe 10 to 15 years of my life, just looking at, okay, what do I really need to forgive myself for? And I started off, writing down things like, I I was so mad at myself because my husband and I were going to go to Peru for a Machu Picchu trip, and we ended up having to cancel it. And I forgot about the tickets and we never used them in time. And so we essentially wasted thousands of dollars because the international tickets weren't re-ticketed within a year. And so we lost the tickets. So I was beating myself up about that for years. And it really impacted my relationship with money for that reason. I, created this whole story about me being bad with money. And in doing this exercise, I recognized, okay, that happened. It was a mistake. Here's what I learned from it. I learned that I need to keep my travel documents organized, and having deadlines like that. Now I put those types of deadlines in my calendar so that I know to take care of them. So that's a very just specific example, but it was something that I was carrying with me that I had shame about, that impacted how I was showing up financially. And I could recognize, oh, there was an opportunity. There's something I learned from this experience. Another example of forgiveness and how we can learn from it is, I might be making dinner one night with the boys and then I snap at them. Actually, I did this the other night with my son Maverick. I can't remember why, but I remember snapping at him. And okay, I could go into beat myself up. I am a bad mom. Oh my gosh, I intend to do better. Why am I snapping at him? And oftentimes, instead of staying present, we go into beating ourselves up. We don't have that compassion that I talked about. But instead, I, took a pause and I said, okay, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I recognize that I'm being triggered by something else and it's coming out sideways. I'm taking it out on my son. And he's 9 years old, almost 10. And I tried to explain that to him, but I apologize, right? So I'm not pushing the story on him, but I felt like he was old enough to kind of learn from my own apology of it. And my forgiveness and learning from that experience was, okay, I recognize that when I am triggered, I need to deal with the thing that's triggering me so that I'm not taking it out on my son, if that makes sense. So I can't see everyone's faces. I'm not sure if you're with me or not, but one of the questions that I see here in the chat is, how do you release emotional baggage being carried from one relationship where it is not possible to speak with the other person? How do you release emotional baggage when it's not possible to speak with the other person? Yeah, so that's a great question. So one way that I would do that is to take ownership of what you co-created, to really get specific with what your piece of it was. And if you can't speak with them, I'm wondering if maybe this person has passed on or there's just no more communication at all. If there's a way to write a letter, that might be something. But otherwise, I would write a letter that's this sort of cleanup conversation. And so the cleanup conversation is actually in my book. It's in part 2, and it's also in my coaching program. And I would recommend, we don't have time for that in our session today or Monday, but I would recommend either getting the book, or I'll tell you about my coaching program later, and being able to at least process through the words and that taking ownership of your contribution to the relationship. And if the person's no longer with us, even writing the letter and sort of offering it to them is a way of releasing it. What you can do too is this forgiveness exercise that I'm going to leave you with for homework. And let me grab that right now just while I remember from our share here. Okay. So here's what this forgiveness exercise looks like. You're going to make a column, or you're going to make a line down the middle of a piece of paper so that you have 2 columns. One is going to be, I haven't forgiven myself for, and the other will be what I learned from this experience that made me a better person. And so you list all the things that you haven't forgiven yourself for. If there's emotional baggage with a relationship, there might be some forgiveness in there. I would be curious if that's coming up. But you'll list all of those items on one side, and then you'll put on the other side how you became a better person going through the experience. Are you all tracking with me on that? Is that clear? Can you give me a thumbs up or ask questions if it's not clear? Got a thumbs up. Okay, clear. So back to Wendy's question, I would do the clear up conversation just so you have sort of a closure. But first and foremost, we're taking responsibility for our own co-creation. And then this is the kind of thing too that's great to, work with someone like myself as a coach or a therapist, just to see if there's anything that you're still holding on to around that relationship, even though you can no longer speak to that person, because we can release it and take ownership ourselves and then release it. Okay, so I'm going to leave that right there. If you have more questions on that, please drop them in the chat. And then what I wanted to do is just, let me pull this back as well so that we can make sure we get everyone's attendance here. There we go. That's just in case you need to put your name in the attendance sheet for today, please. What I wanted to say too is to really take that forgiveness exercise seriously. In the book, I wrote about something that I held a lot of shame on to for a very long time. I mentioned that I used to do a lot of drugs and was really in the party scene. And that was one of the ways that I felt wanted and that I belonged, that counteracted my bogus belief that I had. And so there were some things that I did when I was on drugs that I had a lot of shame over and that I didn't really talk about with a lot of people. And, we talked about bringing forth all parts of ourselves and learning to love all parts of ourselves. And while I still had shame for this one part of myself that did things, 20, 30, however long ago it was, and I did those things to meet a need, right? I did those things to meet an emotional need that I didn't know how to get anywhere else. I still had a lot of shame around that. And so it wasn't until I really sat with this forgiveness exercise and I recognized that, when I was doing the drugs, when I was making choices that I would never make in my life today, it taught me about other people. It taught me to be open-minded. It taught me that I made those choices because I was trying to meet a need for myself. And it wasn't until I finally shared that with one of my friends who is she's a conscious parenting coach as well. We went through Dr. Shafali's Institute together. And I remember her just really looking at me with respect to be able to speak about that and to be able to own that experience. And that was really a big stepping stone for me. So as you're doing this forgiveness exercise, just notice what comes up for you and notice those parts that don't feel so shiny and so bright that maybe you have a little shame or guilt around. Those are likely areas that you need to forgive yourself for. And I guarantee you there is a learning that's on the other side of it. And my invitation beyond that is to be open and sit and see what comes up there, because it is a beautiful process once we can start to have that respect for our full self and recognize why we made some of these choices in the past that maybe we wouldn't make again, or that we have some regret over. Regret gets a bad name, but regret can teach us how we want to be in the future and how we want to show up actually in the present. We who knows what's going to happen in the future, how we want to be in the present. Awesome. So if you have any questions on that, please drop them in the chat. As you're doing that, you have your homework there as well. I wanted to share with you just a little bit about my coaching program, because if you do feel like this is something that you want to go deeper in and you want someone to guide you through this and really get clear on these different aspects and how to move through the bogus belief and to release some of that emotional baggage, I have my Mindful Balanced Life coaching program. And I'm just going to pull up this little slide for you to see. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see that graphic? Okay. Essentially, the way that my program works is we move through the Mindful Balanced Life method, and we really start in, authenticity and getting clear on what you want to create, your vision for your personal and professional life. We work on going through your bogus belief, getting clear on it, and then beginning to rewire it. And then we move into your relationships. So we talk about these relationships with important people in our lives. We have those cleanup conversations, and I help you through that script to make sure that it's the right words and there's not emotion attached to it. And you come to the other side of, truly being able to accept your own responsibility and be in a space to forgive this person. We talk about how to invite our partners to the party. We touched on that a little bit today, and how to create that partnership in the marriage so that there is more equality and we're both giving and we're both receiving. And also how we can show up presently for our children, whether they are 5 years old or 35 years old. We always have an impact in the way that they learn from us. And then as we move through ourself, our relationships, we finally get to, really where this shows up in your life. We look at building community, building that good vibe tribe that can support you, so you have those friendships that say yes and that want to be with you. We look at abundance and prosperity mindset at both work and at home, and then getting clear on your purpose. I know I mentioned that once you do this work, it's like the layers of our false self fall away and our purpose becomes very clear. We're tapped into a deeper sense of meaning that helps to generate energy and get us out of bed in the morning. And so we look at putting that into place. And so the way that this program is delivered is through really easy to digest modules. You're watching a short video a week. And that way, then when you come to coaching calls with me, we get to work together and I can coach you versus me having to teach you, right? A lot of this time in this challenge has been me teaching. And when you're in the Mindful Balanced Life coaching program, you're able to learn. And then during our coaching calls, we can really get deeper into what specifically you need assistance on, and I can be your mirror. I have 7 different types of meditations in this program, so that no matter what style works best for you, you can find one that supports you in being mindful. And then I do offer Voxer, or I offer email and text message support. So some of my clients like to, say a message into their phone for me to get back to them. Others like to send me an email or type. I do both of them, but I support my clients in between our coaching sessions so that you never feel like you're not supported, right? You're receiving all the time, even if you just want to vent, even if you want to run, I'm about to send this email, what do you think? So it's kind of like having a coach in your back pocket with that other piece of support for me. I am going to be rolling out a couple extra bonuses as well that I'll announce on Monday when we have our bonus call, that would come from you enrolling in the coaching program after taking part in this challenge, whether you were here live or whether you are watching the replays. So I'll announce those on Monday. On Monday, we are going to do some celebrations. So we're going to have the raffle drawings for the one-to-one coaching session and also for the $50 Amazon gift card. And we will celebrate some wins. So I would really love for all of you to come with your takeaway, right? You're going to have the weekend and the next few days to kind of let all of this digest. And this is not easy work. I so honor every single one of you for showing up and being here and doing this. Most people would never do this, you guys. And I really should have said that at the very beginning of this time together. Most people would rather do a million other things, but you are committed to your growth and to you showing up as your best self and really having that balance and that feel good success. And so I honor you because I know that you impact so many other people and you're willing to do the work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So please, if you could come on Monday with just, one win, one celebration, it can be big or little, just a takeaway, something that we can all acknowledge each other for. And then we are going to talk about our new way of being. So this is what we're going to lean into instead of our bogus belief. And we're going to talk about our purpose a little bit more. So Monday is going to be a fun day to wrap up this super fast, it feels like to me, challenge that we just went through. So I have just a couple minutes left. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat or you can unmute and ask. Otherwise, your homework is the forgiveness exercise and identifying a takeaway to celebrate with on our session on Monday. Okay, everyone good to go? Any questions? I see hearts. Ooh, I like hearts. That's good. Okay. Please, yes. Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate you holding this space for me and allowing me to share. It makes me very happy to have such open and receptive people. Sign the attendance form if you haven't. If you have any questions on the homework as you're going through it, drop me an email. Send you so much love and I'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.